Have you ever stopped to consider whether the fire we so fear might actually be the path to humanity's true purification? This question may sound strange, even uncomfortable, but perhaps it's the starting point for understanding one of the greatest mysteries of Marian prophecy and revelation. Fire doesn't appear in the Virgin Mary's messages simply as a threat or destruction, but as a sign of cleansing, of transformation, of something that needs to be burned so that new life can emerge. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today: Mary's vision of purification by fire, a theme deeply connected to the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje and the spiritual future of humanity. Since the earliest biblical accounts, fire has always been present as a divine instrument. It appears to illuminate, warm, and guide, but also to consume and transform. It is an element that accepts no middle ground. Either one is purified by it, or one is consumed by its power. And when Mary speaks of the final cleansing, many scholars and believers believe she is referring precisely to this spiritual fire that will traverse the earth and our hearts. Not a merely physical fire, but a fire that exposes, reveals, and forces each person to choose which side they want to remain on. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt that inner flame that burns away everything that has no value and leaves only what is essential? What you're about to discover may surprise you, because we're not just talking about a distant religious symbol, but something that directly touches our present. We live in times of division, crisis, war, and spiritual turmoil. Many say these are signs of the times, and the messages of Medjugorje seem to point precisely in that direction. Among the 7 secrets yet to be revealed, there are rumors that purification will be inevitable, a necessary step for humanity to awaken from its spiritual slumber. And here comes the role of fire. It comes as judgment, but also as hope. It destroys what is false, but preserves what is true. Mary, as mother and intercessor, speaks not to create fear, but to awaken. Her warnings always carry within them the promise of protection for those who trust, pray, and convert. She reminds us that prayer and fasting are spiritual weapons, safe havens from the trials to come. And when we associate these practices with the symbol of fire, we understand that purification is not just a future event, but a journey that begins within each of us. The heart that surrenders itself to God already goes through this process, already transformed by this flame. Stay with me until the end, because you will realize that this topic is much closer and more urgent than it seems. Imagine for a moment, what if humanity were about to go through a dark night in which only hearts, purified by divine fire, could endure? This idea stirs the imagination, but also provokes profound reflection. It's not just about waiting for something to happen out there, but about preparing here and now. And it is at this point that the Marian messages take on even greater weight. They are not just distant prophecies, but personal invitations. A call for each family to become a spiritual refuge, a fortress amidst chaos, sustained by the flame of faith. Fire may seem frightening, but Mary shows us that, when accepted as God's instrument, it becomes a path of light. It reveals truth, strengthens faith, and prepares the ground for something greater. We are faced with a vision that could completely change the way we view the times to come. And in the next step of this journey, we will delve deeper into what this final cleansing means, exploring the signs that are already among us and how they connect directly to the hidden messages of Medjugorje. And as we reflect on all this, perhaps you've felt this flame at some point in your life: a restlessness, a pain that turned into learning, or even that feeling that something greater was happening within you. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far, because your experience can strengthen and inspire others who are also going through this journey. I really want to hear your thoughts, because this exchange is what transforms this space into a true community of faith and hope. And since we're building this journey together, please also leave a like. This may seem like a small gesture, but it makes all the difference. It's what helps this message reach more hearts that need to hear it. Each like is like a spark that spreads and keeps this flame alive. And if you feel this content is valuable and would like to continue receiving messages like this, subscribe to the channel. It's your participation that makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content, especially at a time when so many need light and direction. Stay with me, because we still have much to discover about this purification by fire and the signs that are already beginning to reveal themselves before our eyes. When we talk about fire as purification, we enter a realm that goes beyond metaphor. There's a direct connection to what many believe is hidden in the revelations, especially the 7 messages that remain secret to this day. The mystery surrounding these messages isn't just a curious detail, but something that intrigues scholars, religious people, and even ordinary people who feel, deep down, that they may hold the key to understanding humanity's spiritual future. It's as if we're faced with a closely guarded enigma, a hidden code that, when revealed, will reveal why fire is so necessary in these end times. Think with me. Why would Mary choose to hide certain revelations and not deliver them immediately? What would be the impact of a message that can only be revealed at the right time? This leads us to reflect that perhaps it's not just about the content, but about the preparation. Humanity needs to mature spiritually. It needs to be ready to bear the hidden truth that has not yet been released. This silence can, in itself, be a form of mercy, a time granted for each person to decide which path to follow. And this waiting, this expectation, presents us with the greatest test, trusting without knowing, believing even without seeing. The 7 messages of Medjugorje are not just information hidden somewhere in the sky, but part of a journey of transformation that invites us to look within ourselves. Some say one of them speaks of painful events that will serve as a warning. Others believe they refer to grand signs in the heavens, visible to all humanity. But what truly matters is not the speculative details, but rather the mindset we need to cultivate in the face of this mystery. True purification does not happen when everything is clear and explained, but when faith is able to remain firm even amidst the shadows. This suspense surrounding the messages also mirrors our own lives. How many times have you wondered why certain things remain unanswered? Why some pains aren't immediately explained? Perhaps God's silence, or the silence of the messages, isn't an absence, but preparation. There's a hidden truth we can't yet bear, and the process of waiting becomes a training ground for trust. This completely changes the way we see the inner workings of faith. It's not about rushing, but about preparation. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because if the unrevealed messages hold secrets about the final purification, they also hold secrets about the hope that arises from this trial. We cannot forget that, in all her apparitions, Mary never spoke only of judgment. She always brought the promise of protection and care for those who remain faithful. Fire can burn, but it also lights the way. Hidden messages, however harsh they may be, carry within them the same double meaning, warning and promise. And this tension is what keeps us attentive, awake, ready for the decisions that define not only the course of history, but the direction of our own souls. Imagine the impact when one of these messages is finally revealed. The entire world could be shaken, and the human heart will be tested even more intensely. But if we look with spiritual eyes, we will see that the revelation will not come merely to frighten or punish, but rather to awaken. Everything that has remained hidden until now could be the spark that will ignite the flame of conversion in many hearts. It is at this point that we realize how purification is not only collective, but also personal. Every word, every sign, every revelation is an intimate call, made for each of us to decide where we want to remain. And perhaps that's precisely why these messages haven't yet been revealed to the world. Because the time of revelation isn't just chronological, it's spiritual. It occurs when humanity reaches a critical point in its journey, when choices become inevitable. Until then, we can only live with faith, keep our eyes open, and prepare our hearts. After all, purification begins long before the fire is seen. It begins the moment we decide to let the light penetrate the most hidden parts of ourselves. If this reflection makes sense to you, comment below. This makes sense to me. Fire, within Scripture and Marian revelations, is never merely a poetic image or a loose symbolic device. It carries a power that spans centuries of faith and spirituality, always linked to decisive moments of judgment and renewal. There is no neutrality when we speak of fire. It either consumes what is worthless, or it illuminates and warms what is true. This duality is powerful because it forces us to reflect on the choices we make every day. What within us needs to be burned, what should remain after the flame. This is the essence of the spiritual meaning of fire. It is not just about destruction, but about purification, about revealing what truly matters. In the Bible, fire appears as a clear sign of divine presence as early as the Old Testament. It was in the fire of the burning bush that Moses heard the voice of God. It was in the fire that the people saw Mount Sinai tremble, and it was also with fire that Elijah proved the authenticity of the true God before the false prophets. And if we move on to the New Testament, we see that the Holy Spirit manifested as tongues of fire upon the apostles, giving them courage, clarity, and power for their mission. Fire, therefore, is more than a warning of judgment. It is also a gift that transforms and opens the way to hope. In the messages attributed to Mary, this symbolism persists. Fire is present as a kind of final call, a warning that not only reveals the gravity of the times we live in, but also demonstrates God's mercy in allowing us the chance to begin again. When we speak of purification by fire, we are not just talking about external catastrophes or tragedies, but about an internal process that touches every soul. It is as if Mary were telling us that the final cleansing has already begun within us, in small decisions, in changes of mindset, in choices that seem simple but that, ultimately, define our destiny. This aspect of fire, as renewal, is essential. To avoid falling into the trap of seeing it only as condemnation, there's a hidden truth here. What the fire consumes isn't life itself, but everything that prevents us from living it fully. Pride, indifference, selfishness, lack of love, All of this needs to be burned away so that the human heart can once again beat in tune with the Creator. It's hard to think this way, but it makes sense when we understand that even pain can be an instrument of transformation. How many times has it been precisely a loss, a crisis, or an unexpected shock that made us rethink our journey? Spiritual fire works the same way. It shakes, yes, but it also liberates. There's a profound impact when we begin to view fire this way. It ceases to be merely something that destroys and becomes a silent teacher, revealing the hidden depths of our inner lives. Imagine for a moment a flame illuminating a dark room. It doesn't create new objects, but reveals what was already there, hidden. The same thing happens with divine fire. It exposes, reveals the shadows, and at the same time offers the opportunity to leave them behind. It's no coincidence that, in so many cultures and spiritual traditions, fire appears as a rite of passage. It marks the transition from one stage to another, from an old version of ourselves to a renewed one. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we understand fire as hope, we realize that it is a sign that God has not given up on humanity. If fire comes, it is because there is still something to be saved, something worthy of remaining. Judgment and mercy go hand in hand. The same fire that judges is what prepares the ground for life to flourish again. This completely changes the way we look at the signs of crisis we see in the world today. Instead of just fear, we can see opportunity. Instead of just an end, we can see a beginning. It is this vision that Mary insists on, not terror, but the confidence that after the flames there will be a new dawn. And perhaps this is the most transformative point of this reflection. Fire is not just about humanity's collective destiny, but about each of us. It calls us to a personal confrontation, to face head-on what needs to be purified within us. There's no point in expecting the world to change if our hearts remain hardened. Cleansing begins within, in the silence of our daily decisions, in the small sacrifices and choices that, together, shape the course of our spiritual life. This is the invitation hidden behind the Marian revelations, not to fear the fire, but to accept it as an instrument of love, because only those who pass through the flame of purification are capable of experiencing true freedom. Only those who accept being burned within are capable of renewal without, and it is from this perspective that we must continue, understanding ever more deeply the meaning of this final cleansing that is already beginning to unfold before us. Right there. I'm on this journey too. When we speak of spiritual fire and purification, we cannot ignore the fact that Mary, in all her appearances throughout history, brought a clear and repeated message: prayer, fasting, and conversion. These three pillars are not just devotional practices, but true instruments of preparation. It is as if she, as a mother, were giving us the necessary tools to endure the coming trial, without being consumed by the flames, but rather strengthened by them. Mary never spoke vaguely or superficially. On the contrary, her words were always direct, touching on concrete points in life, as if to say, you cannot change the great events of the world, but you can change yourselves, and that will make all the difference. The call to prayer is not just to repeat words, but to immerse ourselves in a profound dialogue with God, capable of transforming our mindset, aligning decisions, and illuminating paths that previously seemed confusing. Prayer is the silent fire that warms the heart and keeps the soul awake. It is through prayer that we can endure moments of pain and navigate situations that, humanly speaking, would be impossible. Fasting, often misunderstood or reduced to an ancient practice, has an even greater impact than we imagine. It is not simply a renunciation of food, but a gesture of self-mastery, a training in learning to say no to what is fleeting and yes to what is eternal. This discipline shapes the will, strengthens the spirit, and opens space for God's grace to act more intensely. And so we come to conversion. Perhaps the most difficult part, because it requires real change, courage to abandon old habits, hidden truths we carry within us and don't want to face. Conversion is not just an isolated event, but a daily journey, made up of small choices. Mary, by insisting on this call, shows that purification will not come from the outside in, but from the inside out. The external fire will only reveal what we have already cultivated within. If the heart is surrendered, the fire will be light. If the heart is hardened, the fire will be a burden. There's a curious detail behind the scenes of these messages. Many people expect great signs, something spectacular that will shake the entire world, but they forget that Mary always began with simplicity. She speaks of the rosary, prayed as a family, fasting on specific days, reconciliation between siblings, and returning to the sacraments. It's as if she were saying, true preparation is not in expecting the extraordinary, but in being faithful in the ordinary. This is a revelation that completely changes perspective, because it shows us that purification is not just a future event, but something that is already happening as we respond or not to this call. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because Mary's call to conversion is not an empty demand, but a gesture of love. A mother doesn't demand that her children change on a whim, but because she knows the danger that surrounds them. And Mary, with her spiritual vision, sees the impact of our decisions long before we do. She knows that indifference, complacency, and a lack of prayer make us fragile in the face of trials. That's why she insists so much, because she wants us to be prepared, not only to survive, but to go through the purification as living witnesses of hope. This constant call also reveals something important. Conversion is not a solitary journey. When a family prays together, when a community decides to fast, when a group of people chooses to change their mindset, a movement is created that transforms not just individuals, but entire environments. Prayer and fasting become invisible forces that break chains, illuminate shadows, and open doors that seemed closed. How many stories have we heard of people who, by heeding this call, saw their lives transformed in areas that had nothing religious about them? That's when we realize the greatness of this call. It touches not only faith, but the entire human journey, from the most intimate decisions to the most visible consequences. And if we reflect honestly, we will see that Mary never promised ease. On the contrary, she made it clear that the path would be narrow, that the fire would pass over everyone. But she also assured us that those who trust, who truly convert, will find protection, peace, and even joy amidst tribulations. This promise leads us to believe that purification will not only be a test, but also a testimony. Those who faithfully pass through will show the world that it is possible to be light amidst darkness. This perspective helps us understand that conversion is not a burden, but a privilege. It's a chance to begin again, to align our lives with what truly matters, to free ourselves from the shackles of the past and walk more lightly. And this brings us face to face with an essential truth. Mary's call is not for a select few, but for everyone. Every person, regardless of their background, can respond to this call and begin the transformation now. Comment. There, that makes sense to me. The idea of trial as a final cleansing may seem harsh at first glance, but when we look closely, we realize that it carries within it a profound logic, a hidden truth that permeates humanity's spiritual history. Whenever human beings have strayed from the essential and lost themselves in illusions, there has been a moment of shock, pain, and trial that served as a turning point. It is as if life itself, in its silent wisdom, creates mechanisms to awaken us. And in the context of Marian messages, this process is not described as punishment, but as a necessary journey to free the soul from what binds it. Trial, in this sense, is less about punishment and more about transformation. If we think honestly, there is no true growth without facing challenges. Trials expose our weaknesses, test our mindset, and force us to reconsider decisions we may have been avoiding. For a long time, it's a painful process because it touches the roots, cutting through the pride, indifference, and illusions we've built as protective walls. But at the same time, it's liberating. The fire of trial burns down these walls and returns us to our most authentic state, before God and before ourselves. The impact of this is so great that we often only realize it later, when we look back and understand that without that pain, without that shock, we would never have changed direction. This is why Mary insists so much on preparing us, because she knows that purification will not be easy. The modern world has become accustomed to numbing pain, avoiding any kind of suffering, creating shortcuts that promise immediate happiness. But when the illusion is shattered, the emptiness returns with even greater force. The ordeal is just the opposite. It does not promise quick relief, but leads to lasting results. It is the laboratory of the soul, the place where our hidden truths are exposed and where there is no hiding. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we talk about final cleansing, we're talking about a collective process, but also an individual one. Humanity as a whole needs to undergo this purification, but each person also bears their own share. The wars, divisions, and economic and spiritual crises we see in the world are a reflection of the small choices made by millions of hearts. The global ordeal is nothing more than the sum of the individual trials that each person avoids facing. When the collective reaches its limit, purification becomes inevitable. And although it hurts, it is precisely this shock that opens space for something new to be born. Behind the scenes of history, we realize that great transformations have always come after periods of great pain. Entire peoples were reborn after wars, communities strengthened after persecution, individuals found their purpose after irreparable loss. It's as if humanity only awakened when it hit rock bottom, when there were no more illusions to sustain. And it is this awakening that Mary points us to. Purification is not just destruction, but an opportunity for reconstruction. It is an invitation to abandon false securities and rediscover the strength of faith, the essence of love, and the true meaning of life. This process, however, requires courage. The trial exposes weaknesses we prefer to hide, forces us to face truths we try to postpone. And yet, it is in this confrontation that transformation occurs. Think of how many people only discovered the depth of their faith when they experienced painful losses or moments when everything seemed to be falling apart. Pain, paradoxically, opened doors that comfort would never have. So it will be with humanity. The final trial will tear away masks, crumble systems that seemed unshakable, and amid the ashes will emerge a new chance for a new beginning. Mary, in her mission as a mother, doesn't announce this to scare us, but so that we can go through it consciously. She asks us for prayer and conversion because she knows that a prepared heart endures the test better. Those who already live a life of surrender, simplicity, and faith see the trial not as an end, but as a passage. It's like walking through a dark tunnel knowing that at the end there is a way out. The pain remains real, but our mindset changes completely when we are certain it is not in vain. This view of the trial as a final cleansing changes the way we view even the small sufferings of today. That frustration, that loss, that difficulty that seemed meaningless can be seen as part of this larger process. They are like small flames that already teach us how to navigate the greater fire. Those who learn from the details, who accept being molded by the little things, will be stronger when the big moment arrives. The journey of purification doesn't begin tomorrow. It begins now, in the silent choices, in the decisions we make when no one is looking, and most importantly, trials don't come to destroy us, but to reveal us. They show who we truly are, what our essence is, where our heart lies. Those who live on appearances, sustained by illusions, will see it all crumble. But those who build on the rock of faith will find strength even in the midst of the flames. This is the great lesson Mary leaves us. The final cleansing is not a purposeless punishment, but a chance for liberation, for a new beginning, for rebirth amidst the chaos. Right there, I'm on this journey too. When we look at humanity's current reality, we realize that purification is not just a distant idea or an ancient prophecy, but something that becomes increasingly necessary in the face of the shadows gathering around us. These shadows don't appear suddenly, but have gradually formed, silently, like a fog that obscures vision and robs the heart of clarity. Lack of faith, spiritual indifference, and humanity's repeated mistakes have become so common that they often no longer seem strange to us. And this is precisely the most worrying point. Evil no longer needs to hide, because it has found a world that has grown accustomed to it. These shadows manifest themselves in many ways. They are found in the violence that grows and spreads in different places, in the coldness of human relationships, in the inability to forgive, in the pride that places each person as the absolute center of their own life. But they are also present in the small concessions that seem harmless but slowly corrode the spirit. The lie that is repeated so many times until it is accepted as truth. The incessant search for immediate pleasure, the valorization of the material above the spiritual, all of this creates a mentality that distances us from what truly matters and traps us in illusions. And perhaps, the most painful part is realizing how spiritual indifference has grown. It's not just about people who don't believe, but about an entire generation that no longer cares about seeking something greater. The existential void has been filled with distractions, with promises of happiness that don't last, with the rush of a life that leaves no room for silence and prayer. This indifference is one of humanity's greatest shadows, because it creates an apathy that makes the heart insensitive to God's call. It's not an explicit rejection, but a slow forgetting, like a flame that dies out without anyone noticing. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because these shadows aren't just external realities, they also live within each of us. How many times have we chosen the easy path, even knowing it wasn't the right one? How many times have we cast faith aside in decisive moments, trusting more in our own strength than in God's presence? This contrast between what we know and what we do shows how we all participate, in some way, in this scenario. The shadows are not just the fault of large systems or governments, but also the result of millions of small daily choices that shape the direction of the world. The impact of this is visible. Humanity, immersed in its own illusions, begins to lose its sense of the sacred. What was once seen as untouchable is now treated as banal. Human life loses value. Truth becomes relative. Faith is ridiculed. We are facing a spiritual crisis that goes beyond religious differences. It is a crisis of meaning, identity, and purpose. Without faith, hope, and love, human beings lose their way and end up surrendering to any promise of power or pleasure. That seems to fill the void. That is why purification is so necessary. It comes not as revenge, but as a response, a wake-up call, a jolt that breaks the routine of indifference and forces us to focus on what truly matters. Because when darkness seems to prevail, the light needs to shine brighter. And Mary, in her messages, warns us about precisely this, not to despair, but to prepare us. She knows that shadows exist, but she also knows that no heart is irreversible when it opens itself to grace. This journey of confronting the shadows is both individual and collective. Each person needs to face their own flaws, mistakes, and omissions, but we also need to look at humanity as a whole and understand that, together, we chose the paths that led us here. Purification, in this sense, is like a new beginning, a chance to leave behind indifference and rediscover the power of faith. It won't be easy, because it will shake structures that seemed unshakable, but it will be necessary, because only then will humanity be able to breathe again. And even in the face of this bleak picture, there is hope, because simply recognizing the shadows is already a step toward the light. The greatest danger is not falling, but becoming accustomed to falling. Mary's call is precisely for us not to accept this darkness as destiny, but to fight against it, with the weapons of prayer, faith, and conversion. Thus, purification ceases to be merely a distant threat and becomes an opportunity for transformation here. And now. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Fire has always been seen as something fearsome, a force that destroys, consumes, and leaves behind only ashes. But when we look with the eyes of faith, we realize that it also carries within itself a hidden promise, that even amidst the flames, there is something that can be preserved, something that is born renewed. It is this paradox that reveals the beauty of spiritual fire. It is frightening, yes, because no one likes the idea of going through the test. But it is precisely in this process that the human heart finds the chance to be renewed, to discover God's love in a way it would never have known in times of comfort and stability. Ashes are not a sign of an end, but of a beginning. They show that what was worthless has been consumed, but what is true remains, strengthened and pure. The impact of this vision completely changes our mindset. When we understand that fire comes not only to destroy, but to reveal, we stop looking at it with fear and begin to see it as an ally. Of course, no one desires suffering, but there is a hidden truth amidst pain. It opens space for transformation. How many people only discovered the depth of their faith after facing losses, illnesses, or crises that seemed unbearable? The flame, while burning, also illuminated, showing paths that were previously hidden. This is how divine fire works. It helps us through dark nights, but at the same time, it ignites within us a light that cannot be extinguished. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the light emerging from the fire is not just a poetic detail, but a profoundly impactful spiritual reality. When Mary speaks of purification, she points not only to judgment but also to the promise. She makes it clear that those who trust, who remain faithful, will find protection amidst the flames. This means that the ordeal does not have the final word. What truly defines the journey is not the fire itself, but what emerges from it. It is like gold, which only reaches its most valuable form after undergoing intense heat. So too does the human heart. It only finds its fulfillment after overcoming what seemed impossible. And the most impressive thing is realizing that this light isn't just individual. When a person walks through the fire and remains steadfast, their life becomes a testimony for many others. It's like a torch that lights other torches. Suffering, when experienced with faith, generates not only pain, but also hope. It shows that it's possible to endure, that it's possible to be faithful even amidst the ashes. This is the great revelation Mary wants to show us. The fire may seem like the end, but it's actually the beginning of something greater, because it reveals God's love in its most intense form, a love that doesn't abandon, even when all seems lost. Behind the scenes of life, we often don't understand why certain things happen. We question, complain, and feel wronged. But when we look back, we see that it was precisely during that most painful period that we grew, matured, and discovered strengths we never knew existed. Fire illuminates hidden truths, exposes what needs to be left behind, and reveals what is essential. It doesn't come to destroy us, but to restore us to ourselves, cleansed of everything that kept us from what truly matters. This light that emerges from the fire also teaches us something about decisions. When we go through moments of trial, we must choose to let ourselves be consumed by pain or allow it to transform us. This choice is the turning point, the watershed between remaining in darkness or allowing a new light to shine. And what Mary asks is precisely this, that we not run away from the process, but that we trust that behind the fire lies a greater purpose. Because if there are flames, there is also the promise of clarity. If there are ashes, there is also life, reborn from them. Purification then ceases to be merely a distant concept and becomes a concrete experience, touching every detail of our existence. God's love manifests itself not only in peaceful moments, but reveals itself even more intensely in moments of crisis. It is in this contrast that we discover the strength of faith, the beauty of hope, and the power of trust. The fire reveals our weaknesses, but it also shows that we are not alone. And in the end, what remains is not the mark of destruction, but the memory of the light that shone amidst the darkness. Right there, I'm on this journey too. When we look closely at today's world, we realize that the signs aren't hidden, somewhere, far away. They're right there before us, screaming amid the chaos of everyday life. Crises that seem endless, wars that spread like open wounds, divisions that tear apart families, communities, and entire nations, and natural disasters that arrive without warning, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. None of this can be seen as mere coincidence or part of a common historical cycle. There's a spiritual weight behind these events, as if they were silent, but insistent signs that something greater is happening behind the scenes of humanity. The Marian revelations have always pointed to this awakening. Mary didn't speak of dates, didn't provide exact timetables, but she warned that we would reach a time when events themselves would be the clearest messages. The world, in its haste and distraction, tries to ignore these signs, but they keep emerging. ever more intense, ever more impossible to hide. The global economy is teetering, political systems are corroding, violence is intensifying, and even nature seems to scream. It's as if all of creation is in turmoil, reminding us that we were not made to live disconnected from our spiritual essence. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because these signs are not only external, but also internal. The human heart also gives signals when something is not right. Rising anxiety, alarming levels of depression, loneliness, and a hyper-connected world. All of this reveals that humanity is sick from within. It's not just the war outside that destroys, but the silent war within people, which consumes them without them often realizing it. The Marian messages seem to point to this very detail. Before the great external trials become evident, we are already experiencing an inner battle that prepares us for what is to come. The hidden truth here is that none of this happens by chance. The impact of these signs is educational. It forces us to stop and reflect. How many times has it been precisely a crisis that led someone to change their mindset, rethink decisions, and seek something greater? Humanity, as a collective, must also go through this. The collapse of structures, the emergence of catastrophes, the increase in divisions. All of this acts as a mirror, showing that we can no longer move forward sustained by illusions. The shadows that once hid are now exposed, and the signs of the times are proof that the purification has already begun. And the most intriguing thing is to see how these signals connect, as if forming a vast mosaic. Wars that seem local end up influencing the entire world. Economic crises in one region impact the lives of people thousands of miles away. Climate change affects different countries simultaneously. Nothing is isolated, and this shows us that all of humanity is interconnected. Mary had already warned about this, that we would reach a time when collective choices would have global consequences. Our spiritual journey can no longer be viewed solely individually, because the impact of each decision, large or small, reverberates beyond our imagination. These signs also remind us of the fragility of our human constructs. Systems that seemed unshakable prove fragile in the face of sudden crises. Power structures, financial empires, even advanced technologies prove incapable of offering the security they promised. It is at this point that the call to conversion and faith takes on even more meaning. When everything material trembles, it is spirituality that remains like a firm rock. The signs of the times come not only to frighten, but to show the way. They are like road signs, reminding us to adjust our course before it's too late. But there's something that can't be forgotten. Signs are also promises. If they herald pain and crisis, they also herald renewal and hope. Mary never brought messages of judgment alone, but always mixed with the certainty that, after the dark night, the sun will rise again. Destruction is never the end. It opens space for a new beginning. Every catastrophe, no matter how harsh, reveals the human capacity to rebuild, to unite, to discover hidden strengths. It is in this balance between pain and hope that the beauty of the signs of the times lies. They prepare us for the worst, but also announce the best that is yet to come. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Amid so many warnings, so many powerful images of purification, trials, and fire, there is one detail that cannot be overlooked. Mary never spoke solely to instill fear. The motherly heart that speaks in her messages points not only to judgment, but, above all, to hope. What is often misunderstood as a threat is, in fact, a promise of care. She assures that those who trust, persevere, and follow her guidance will find spiritual protection even in the face of the greatest storms. This protection does not mean the absence of pain, but it does mean that no pain will have the power to destroy what is essential. It is like being inside a solid house in the midst of a gale. The wind blows, the rain falls, but the structure remains standing. This promise of protection is one of the greatest Marian revelations, because it shows that the history of humanity is not destined for despair. When Mary asks for prayer, fasting, and conversion, it is not only to prepare us to face the fire, but to ensure that, as we pass through it, we are not consumed. She always reminds us that God does not abandon His children, and that trust is the strongest shield against darkness. This is the hidden truth that often goes unnoticed. It is not just a warning, but a promise. A promise that goes beyond external circumstances and is grounded in faith. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the protection promised by Mary is not just a distant spiritual concept, but something that manifests itself in a concrete way. How many stories have we heard of people who, in situations of extreme danger, felt an inexplicable peace or were delivered from something that seemed inevitable? For many, this may be coincidence, but for those who live their faith, it is a clear sign of an invisible care, a silent intervention that accompanies every step. This protection is neither magical nor automatic, but the fruit of a living relationship of trust. Those who truly surrender, who choose to walk this journey of transformation, experience this presence as a force that cannot be explained, but rather felt. Behind the scenes of Marian messages, hope always occupies a central place. Mary doesn't point us to a future of destruction, but to a journey that culminates in renewal. She reminds us that even amidst the flames, the light of divine protection shines. This certainty completely changes our mindset toward purification. The fire ceases to be merely fear and becomes a promise, because we know we are not alone. It's like crossing the darkness with a lit flame in our hands. The night remains night, but the light ensures we won't get lost. This promised protection also has a collective aspect. When families unite in prayer, when entire communities respond to the call, an invisible network of spiritual protection is created that covers much more than we can see. Mary insists on the power of family prayer because she knows that it is there, that the fortress against the divisions of the world lies. When a home becomes a refuge of faith, it becomes a wall against the darkness. The promise is not just individual, but extends to all who choose to walk together. And there's another detail that reveals the impact of this promise: it excludes no one. Mary doesn't speak only to the saints or the strongest, but to everyone. Protection is available to every heart willing to trust, regardless of their history or the scars they bear. It's as if she's extending her mantle and saying, "Here is room for all who wish to begin again." This makes her message even more powerful, because it eliminates any excuse or barrier. The invitation is universal, but the decision is personal. The protection promised by Mary, therefore, is not an exemption from the fire, but a certainty that the fire will not have the final word. She does not spare us from the journey, but she assures us that the journey will not be made alone. This difference is crucial because it transforms fear into trust, despair into hope, fragility into courage. It is the certainty that, even amidst the greatest trials, there is an invisible care sustaining each step. Comment there, "That makes sense to me." Within all the messages Mary brought throughout history, there is one detail that recurs with particular force: the importance of family. In Medjugorje, this emphasis becomes even clearer, because the family is not just a place for coexistence, but is seen as a true living altar, a sacred space where prayer finds its deepest roots. It is curious to note how, amid so many revelations about crises, wars, and signs of the times, Mary always returns to her point of origin: the house, the home, the environment where each heart learns, from an early age, the difference between light and darkness. She shows that the family is more than a social structure. It is a spiritual fortress, a bulwark against the forces that seek to dilute faith and destroy hope. When we speak of family as a refuge, we are not talking about a perfect or conflict-free place, but rather a space that, even in its fragility, has the capacity to become a shelter from the darkness of the end times. It is in the home that prayer gains substance, that fasting can be lived concretely, and that conversion becomes a shared process. Mary insists on family prayer because she knows that when homes unite, invisible walls of spiritual protection are created that expand beyond the walls of the house. It is as if each family, by praying together, becomes a small flame that, together with so many others, illuminates the darkness of the world. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding the family as a living altar completely changes our mindset about what it means to endure difficult times. It's not just about seeking strength individually, but about transforming the home into a school of faith and perseverance. A table where we share not only material, bread, but also hope. A room where we don't just watch the news of chaos, but where the voice of prayer rises. A bedroom that is not just a place of rest for the body, but also a place of silent encounter with God. This is the role of the family in the Marian. Messages to become a space where love conquers indifference, and where faith remains alive when everything around us seems to falter. And the impact of this extends beyond the family circle. A family that becomes a spiritual refuge influences neighbors, friends, and entire communities. Behind the scenes, when a family decides to truly live their faith, a silent wave of transformation is created that reaches even those who have never set foot inside that home. This is why Mary insists so strongly on this point, because she knows that the world is sustained by small, scattered nuclei of light, which together form a much greater mantle of protection. If each home becomes an altar, all of humanity finds the strength to undergo purification. This vision also leads us to reflect on the decisions we make within the home. Every gesture, every word, every choice contributes to strengthening or weakening this refuge. When there is prayer, forgiveness, and dialogue, a fortress is built. But when there is cold silence, indifference, or division, the home loses its luster and becomes vulnerable. Mary's message invites us to transform everyday life into spirituality, reminding us that we don't need to wait for special moments to live our faith. It is born in simplicity, in the embrace that reconciles, in the meal eaten in gratitude, in the short prayer before bed. These are the details that build an invisible but powerful altar, and we cannot forget that family is also the first place where we learn to face trials. It is in daily life that we are shaped, that we develop patience, generosity, courage, and faith. The purification Mary proclaims does not begin outside, but within the home, in our closest relationships. If a family can remain steadfast amidst the tensions and crises of everyday life, it will also be able to withstand the great trials of the end times. The home, in this sense, becomes a spiritual training ground, a place where one learns to bear crosses and share hope. Mary, in speaking of the family as a fortress, shows that true protection against darkness will not come from political or economic structures, but from the ability of each home to remain faithful. When the great structures of the world crumble, it will be in small domestic communities that faith will find its refuge. This revelation is enormously impactful because it reminds us that we don't need to wait for the big ones to do something. The beginning of transformation lies in the small, in the intimate, in what happens within our own homes. Comment there. That makes sense to me. When we think of purification, we often imagine something grand, collective, involving all of humanity in events that mark generations. And yes, this global dimension exists, this movement that reaches the world as a whole. But we cannot forget that purification begins much earlier, in a much more intimate place, within each heart. The fire, Mary announces, is not only that of great external trials, but also that which burns silently in our personal lives, revealing who we truly are. This is the most profound and also the most challenging invitation, because it requires courage to allow God to touch the areas we prefer to hide, those wounds and choices we often keep secret, even from ourselves. The truth is that each person carries a battlefield within them. There are memories that weigh heavily, decisions that still hurt, resentments we can't let go of, and even silent addictions that slowly steal our freedom. All of this becomes fuel for the fire of purification. But here's the essential point: God doesn't send this fire to destroy us, but to free us. The pain we feel when we have to leave something behind isn't punishment, it's rebirth. It's like pruning a tree. At first it feels like loss, but it's precisely the cutting that allows the fruit to grow more abundantly later. This is the logic of individual purification: cutting to generate life, burning to illuminate. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when Mary speaks of conversion, prayer, and fasting, she's not just presenting religious practices, but proposing a path of radical transformation. Every true prayer is like a spark that ignites within the heart. Every fast lived with sincerity is like a flame that consumes pride and makes room for humility. And every gesture of conversion, however small, is a decision that changes our mindset and brings us closer to the essence of life. This transformation doesn't happen all at once, but in stages, like a journey that requires persistence. The fire of purification doesn't burn everything at once. It acts little by little, revealing hidden truths, illuminating shadows, and giving clarity to new choices. The impact of this is enormous, because it changes not only personal life but also the environment around them. A purified person, who lives more consciously and surrenderedly, becomes a beacon for others. You don't need to preach or impose anything. Your own life becomes a silent witness that grace is real. Behind the scenes of everyday life, at work, in the family, in the simplest relationships, this transformation begins to overflow. And this is the point Mary always wanted to emphasize. When each person allows themselves to be purified, the whole world begins to change. The global is born from the individual. The future of humanity is born from the small decisions of each heart. This invitation to purification is also a call to sincerity. There's no point in hiding behind social masks, well-constructed appearances, or a faith that's merely lip service. God's fire penetrates all of this and touches what is real. He doesn't seek artificial perfection, but a willing heart. This is why Mary never speaks of fear, but of hope, because she knows that, even in the face of so many human weaknesses, there is always the possibility of starting over. Each person who decides to make room for purification has already begun their own journey of liberation, and it is here that we understand that purification is not a future event, but a choice made now. Each time we choose forgiveness over resentment, faith over indifference, truth over lies, we are allowing the divine fire to act within us. Each daily decision is a small flame that, combined with so many others, shapes the heart to withstand the greatest trials to come. It's not about waiting for a day marked on the calendar, but about living today as one who is in preparation. It's an ongoing process, made up of falls and new beginnings, but one that strengthens and frees the soul with each step. Mary asks for nothing more than this: that we allow God to purify us here and now. May each of us look within and ask sincerely, what still needs to be burned within me? What still binds me and prevents me from being fully free? This self-examination is painful, but it is also the beginning of true liberation. When we have the courage to face our shadows, we make room for the light to grow. And this light, however small at first, has the power to change everything around it. And there, that makes sense to me. After everything we've seen so far, it's clear that fire is not an end in itself, but an instrument for something greater to happen. It doesn't come to annihilate, but to transform. Fire is the watershed that separates what is fleeting from what is eternal, what is fragile from what is true. It is in it that we discover that ashes are not a sign of defeat, but of rebirth. Mary never spoke of fear when she spoke of purification. On the contrary, her words always carried the hope that, after the test, humanity will find a new light, a new chance to begin again with greater clarity, more faith, and more love. This is the most profound point of the entire message. Purification does not mean destruction, but liberation. Every tear, every crisis, every dark night of the soul can become fertile soil where new life germinates. Fire, when accepted as part of the journey, reveals to us the hidden truth that God never abandons us, even when everything around us seems to be crumbling. There is a promise that remains firm, that life will rise again, purer and stronger. Purification is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new stage. Preparation for a time when faith and hope will have room to flourish even more intensely. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this transformation doesn't just happen on a collective level, but also within each of us. The real impact of this message lies in realizing that the fire already begins in our daily decisions. It's when we choose to forgive, when we decide to be light amidst the shadows, when we choose the truth even if it hurts. It's these seemingly small gestures that shape our souls to overcome great trials. Behind the scenes of life, it's in these silent choices that the course of our spiritual journey is decided. And it's precisely here that Mary's message finds its strength. She shows us that no one is condemned to fear. Everyone can choose hope. So, if this reflection spoke to your heart, I want to invite you to express yourself in a special way. Leave the phrase, "I am ready to be purified," in the comments. This statement is not just an interaction, but a symbolic gesture of surrender, a way of showing that you accept this journey of transformation. And if this content resonated with you, please like the video. It will help this message reach more people who also need to hear that the fire is not an end, but a beginning. And of course, if you want to continue receiving these revelations and delve even deeper into the spiritual mysteries Mary left us, subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any future content we'll bring. Here's another video that continues this mystery. Click and join me to discover what's to come. If you've made it this far, it's because this message spoke to you in some way, and I want to thank you for staying with me in this reflection until the end. If you feel that this content brought value to your life and opened a new space within you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. That way you can continue walking alongside me and receiving content that can further strengthen your faith and your journey. Also, leave a comment to let me know you stuck it out. Right, I'm with you until the end. It'll be special to see how many are living this moment together, forming a true community. And if this video resonated with you, please leave a like. It's a simple way to show that we're connected and help this message reach others who also need it. And it doesn't stop there. There's a video right here that complements this topic. Click and follow me there. Let's dive even deeper into this mystery together.